Hi, guys. Welcome to the Gay and Brown in the 21st Century podcast. So, as I'm going to make a tradition of saying at the beginning of every podcast, all you really have is your truth, your account, and your story. And I wanted to note too that that's not to reduce that or say that you need something else, but more to draw attention to the fact that a lot of the time, when that's not enough, that's not sufficient for people, that's a problem with the system, the culture, and just those people. So I do want that to be like something that, every podcast I want to introduce it that way. I want that to be kind of like something that is associated with the podcast. But I did want to speak more to like what made me like want that to be something that is like associated with it. And I think recently I just been reflecting a lot about family. I'm in seminary and like things that have come up because of that, and just how like I feel like in a lot of ways being in this space and even in my family or like growing up in my community too, like a lot of the times or with elders even, like it just always felt like my perspective wasn't enough. And I just found that weird, especially considering like people always told me I was smart and people always considered me smart. And I think like what comes with that is that you should be. And I mean everyone, it doesn't matter if how smart you are. I think everyone has a capability or the capacity to perceive things and to recount things. Even kids, like we see things that we know, like when you're younger, like you see things and and you understand, you can recount. So like as you get older, if an adult or someone is telling you their perspective and you're kind of not like taking that into consideration, then it's kind of like again what I said, it's a flaw with that person, it's a flaw with the culture, it's a flaw with them. It's not a flaw with you, because you're recounting what you experienced. And as humans, I feel like we have a responsibility to like care when someone is saying that they experienced something, or someone's bringing something to us and saying, hey, like, can you consider this? Can you like, can you be there for me with this? Can you hear me in this? Can you like make me feel validated in this? But yeah, I feel like a lot of times it just becomes people dismissing people. And yeah, so I think that's what makes me want to like it to be a big thing on the podcast. But I think also like on my journey, I've been healing from things. I've been, growing up and being gay and a lot of things that I dealt with. I think that a lot of my issues and a lot of like the pain that I like had to navigate really came from trying to convince people. And like I said, like that's not something that you need to do. And I think I wish I had the foresight prior, like before, to like know that, and to know that like that's kind of like it's pointless to sit there and try to like convince someone if they initially don't want to see your perspective. Then like you're doing yourself a disservice by continuing to try. It's better to just kind of trust your own perspective. And yeah, I think that like I said, it's an issue with the other person. And sometimes it is helpful. I think that's human to want other people to heed whatever our perspective is, or the things that our perspective is telling us about a situation or how it affected us. But I think we should validate ourselves and, where we are and how that thing affected us and what we know about what we experienced. So I think you have to really make it a conscious effort to move away from like trying to convince somebody. Like at the first sign of that person not understanding, like it's just compromising yourself to continue to try to make that person understand. And I know like I'm saying all of this and I haven't really fully like given context or like my introduction, but I'm Dominican. I grew up in a very densely populated community. My grandma lived up the block from me. Extended family lived on the same street. There was like 3 generations in my neighborhood, probably more, I don't even know, because my great grandfather was like 100 and something and he lived up the street from me as well. But I always tell people like there's so many things that I'm constantly realizing, like even the fact that all those generations lived in my neighborhood, the fact that my dad was born in the Dominican Republic, the fact that he's in his 60s. Like I feel like there was a lot of things that, like, my uncles were respected in the neighborhood, and they're this very, over, like, hyper masculine image of, like, what a man is. And so I think there were so many things that me growing up as, like, a feminine gay man, me being very much not relating to people and not knowing, like, not having anyone to kind of guide me, or like someone to look at and be like, oh, that's how gay men are supposed to navigate this place. Like, all those things really did affect me. And I think even when you're trying to, like, occupy space and you're trying to make choices about expressing yourself, and you're in an environment where you're constantly surrounded by, like, very hyper masculine men, and you grow up and there's men on the stoops, and like I said, my uncles were respected, and so they had all these friends, and I had to constantly be interacting with countless men, however many. Like, I would walk up the block and it would be like 10 men. But so, like, as a feminine presenting gay man, like, that was a lot for me. And so there's all these things, like, I'm saying all these things, and I hope that it kind of gives some context to, like, where I'm coming from with some of the stuff that I'm saying. But yeah, I had a big family too. Like, my mom has 5 siblings, 3 aunts, 2 uncles, and lots of cousins, probably like 15 of us. But we saw, like, extended family, friends, all of that was kind of like a conjoined thing. Like, there was never any distinction. Like, I think there's a lot of loyalty, and that's nice, and it's beautiful in some ways, but that brought up a lot for me as well, because it felt like I was obliged to kind of talk to all these people and engage all these people at a very young age, when I didn't fully understand myself. I didn't fully know how to be myself, and, like, constantly having in these interactions with people every single day, when, like, I wasn't sure about myself, it was really jarring for me. It was a lot for me. It added to my plate. It just felt like people felt entitled to my being. People felt entitled to, like, deconstructing me and scrutinizing me at a time when I wasn't ready for that. Like, I don't think any child is ready for that. So no less an adult. So this is all just, like, context to, like, the things that I'm saying. But I think as a person, whose identity and my perspectives were off center a lot of the times, there's a lot of times that my opinions were dismissed without hardly any engagement, and I took it personal, and I was affected by that, and I think eventually I realized, like, people didn't want things to unravel, and they were, like, trying to protect their perspectives of things at any cost, because that was what they wanted to believe. And I think that my perspective for them, it unraveled things because it challenged what they knew or what they thought they knew. And they wanted to protect that image of, like, the people or the place, that they had, and how they experienced it. And so, again, like, my perspective challenged that. So, like, I used to take it really personal, but I feel like at a, basic level, when I started to understand, like, and it's still a constant project and a constant thing that I'm, like, teaching myself, like, people, and I used to say it to my cousins all the time too, like, even my younger cousins, and, like, the cousins that were around my same age, like, I would be like, or people in my family, like my sisters or whatever, I would be like, yeah, and you have a different experience, because, you have a different, like, everyone has a different experience. It's not your experience. You're not having the same experience. And I would just say that because it's like, I feel like that's a really, like, people have different experiences. And I feel like that was something, like, it sounds redundant or, like, simple or just, like, stupid in a way, but it's like some people really don't understand that, because you grow up in a family structure, you grow up in a neighborhood, and, people that have normative identities, they're not having a different experience. And so people kind of conform to this same way of relating to a place, and that just becomes a thing that everyone's supposed to take, just as fact. So yeah, but I think that's why, like, an important thing, like what I was saying earlier too, is, like, you really have to heal to a point that, like, you can value your perspective enough to see that, like, to see what you have to say as important and considerable enough to guide change and to guide a new approach, and to give your own feelings that enough regard, like, because what I was saying, like, people didn't regard my feelings and didn't care about them, but I think, like, you have a certain power and a certain agency within yourself to, like, care about your feelings, and to consider your feelings, and to just give them that much, to give them enough significance, and, like, you can do that within yourself. Like, it's always, of course, we're communal beings, and I've learned that in some of my like classes. Like that is something important that I've learned, that like we're interdependent. Like even as adults, like we as a culture are always like trying to overemphasize and prioritize independence, but we are like psychologically, like we're communal beings and we need support, we need those things. But at times I think, especially like when you're navigating a culture that is not familiar with your identity, villainizes your identity, all these things, like the onus is on you to like make that distinction and say no, yeah, actually, like I'm gonna give it the weight. If nobody around me is gonna give my perspective the weight, I'm gonna give it the weight, because I experienced it, I felt it, like it affected me, and so I'm gonna give it the regard. I'm gonna take it seriously. I'm gonna care about it. I'm gonna, change things in my life and make choices that are from that, the weight that I give that, and I feel like that's important. And so kind of on that, like recently I've been having struggles. I had struggles all through this degree, really, because, another thing about being a gay man, a gay brown man in the 21st century, I do not advise anyone who shares those identities to go to seminary. I do not. I do not. I do not. Did not. Very much did not enjoy this experience. 0 out of 5 stars. Would not advise anyone to, with those identities, to go to seminary in the 21st century. So just think on that, like I like have been struggling through my degree, but been like especially recently because I've had my thesis and on top of my courses, and a lot of the coursework here is just very like demoralizing, very very regret, like just old fashioned, and like just very colonial. I feel like there's, even though they try to project this image of like we're about justice, I think there's a lot of investment in the colonial project, or the colonial inheritance, if you would say. I don't know how to phrase it. And so there's just been a lot of struggles, like just with the politics of dealing with professors. And the crazy thing is that it's professors that like are of color, are queer, etc. But I think even when people are navigating the system, like in positions of power, like I think there's still a negotiation or a self-hatred, or that they don't like people that reflect them. They don't like seeing themselves reflected in people, because they learn to hate themselves in these spaces because other people hate them in these spaces who occupy more power. So there's been a lot of challenge with that, and like honestly, like I've considered like leaving and just like, and what's crazy for me and what I wanted to talk about was like kind of going on that line of like self-worth and respecting your experience, because there's been times that I really just want to, like, I'm like, am I gonna pass these classes? Am I gonna, like, can I get through this semester? Like, what do I do then? Do I just pack up and leave? Like, I dorm here, and like I'm from New York, but I do dorm here, and so I'm like, do I just pack up and go home? Like, I don't know. But it made me think, like, just even like how minorities, we always feel this need to overperform and to prove that we belong somewhere, and that we're worthy of being in a space that is, more privileged people are it's more prevalent that they occupy, where they're more prevalent. I'm just saying so many words, but I was just thinking about that. Like I was thinking, and then just being a seminary too, like I think that adds to like the shame element of it, and feeling like, why, like maybe I can just stay here and I could flunk. Like, why is that, like that's not the ideal thing to do. But if I am giving effort and this space just hasn't tried to recognize that or tried to, accommodate me, like, and just even like if I was to flunk, if I was to just stay for the semester and submit work and just not like pass, like that, like I just feel like for me to not have considered that as an option, like of course that's not me, I'm gonna pass my courses, but just thinking about that made me think about, feeling worthy and feeling like we have to constantly overperform as minorities, and feeling like holding both these identities, being brown and being gay and feminine, all these things, and like always feeling like you have to, like, I can't be here if I'm not like proving and constantly showing up the way that I'm expected to show up, and yeah, just overcompensating, because I think that if it was a white person, they would just flunk and not have shame about it. And there are a lot of people that I've encountered here, white kids that are really just here for vibes, here to just take space, to just